Pink goes good with green.
Goes well with green.
It so does.
Does it? If by pink you mean your gayness, and by green you mean every single moment of this entire movie, let's talk about why Wicked is gayer than a pair of ruby slippers. So for a quick kind of potted history of Wicked, if anybody doesn't know, of course we start with L. Frank Baum's books and then the film, and then Gregory Maguire wrote the book Wicked in 95, which was like a reimagining of the Wicked Witch of the West's backstory and kind of thinking about what it might have been like if she had been more than just her epithet of wicked, and what makes someone wicked, and yeah, it's such a great like concept. The book is definitely a lot darker than the musical, a lot more kind of political, a little bit drier, I think some might argue. I'm not going to be going into the book too much, but I do think that there are certain things where I think it makes sense to come back to the book. So I think it's important to remember that the musical and the movie are based on the book. Now, Gregory Maguire is gay himself, and he has described the relationship between Glinda and Elphaba as profound and devoted. I did actually see, when I first started looking into this, I had seen like a number of people say online that he had said that Glinda and Elphaba were in a relationship, or that that was like the intended kind of reading of his books. So, because it's a series of books, not just one. And I couldn't actually find any genuine proof of that. I think that possibly what has happened is that someone has misread a particular quote of his, and then the misreading of that has been kind of perpetuated, which is a shame. And obviously, you know, I would love it if he was like down for it and was like that was what he had been planning. But I think realistically, I'm not gonna just make stuff up. But yeah, what he has talked about in interviews, which I think is possibly where the misreading has come from, is that Wicked itself challenges kind of boundaries, societal norms, and those are kind of the broader themes of the novel, and that Glinda and Elphaba's relationship, it can definitely be read as like profound, intimate, and maybe something that isn't quite as easily definable as just a friendship. So an actual quote from him about Glinda and Elphaba was, "If someone wants to say that they're in love with each other, I wouldn't contradict it. That's a perfectly valid interpretation of their intense relationship, but I think love takes many forms." And I think that's often kind of the way that people perceive Glinda and Elphaba's relationship. It is a love story, but it's a platonic one. And that's, of course, a totally valid reading of the story, but this is not going to be platonic. It is going to be a gay reading, and if you don't like that, then deal with it. Yeah, and then we have the 2003 musical adaptation on Broadway, which, to my mind, with its kind of softer, less political tone, really, really upped the gayness. And I think that we can all kind of agree that even if we don't think that Elphaba and Glinda themselves are gay, that the musical is a queer cultural phenomenon. And I think that we can read kind of broad queer themes into the musical itself, you know, self-acceptance, chosen family, breaking free from societal expectations, that kind of stuff. Classic queer tropes, you know? And now we have the movie adaptation with the magnificent, gorgeous, talented Cynthia Erivo and the magnificent, talented, gorgeous Ariana Grande. And I just cannot tell you the deep, deep gay joy in my heart to see such amazing hyper femme, for goth femme lesbian representation on my hometown silver screen. Village Cinema trying to turn me on. Now, for those of you who haven't seen either the Broadway musical or the movie, what are you doing? Go see it immediately and then come back and hang out with me and we can talk about how gay it is. But if you haven't and you can't be bothered doing that, I'll do a very quick synopsis. So the movie follows Act 1 of the musical, and the second film will follow Act 2. How closely, we're not sure. But I do think that Act 2 is important for the queer readings of this story. So I'll try and kind of like make it all make sense, whether I'm talking about the movie or the musical. So we have our first song, No One Mourns the Wicked, which actually takes place at the end of the Wizard of Oz movie with Judy Garland. So it's after Dorothy has killed the witch and clicked her stolen ruby slippers 3 times and gone home. And we have kind of the celebrating munchkins. And so how we start is we've got that song, and then one of the munchkins asks Glinda, "Is it true that you used to be Elphaba's friend?" And then Glinda starts telling us about how she first met Elphaba when they were at Shiz University. And we go back in time, and the rest of the film is from the past, so before Dorothy arrives in Oz. So in both the film and the musical, we go back in time to Shiz University where Elphaba and Glinda first met. And so we have Elphaba, who is going to become the Wicked Witch, who is intelligent and passionate but ostracized because she has this green skin, and Glinda, who is her self-absorbed, perky roommate. And so at first they clash a lot, they totally hate each other, but their relationship kind of softens into a deep, really, really wonderful friendship. And we also see the kind of character arc of Elphaba going from this kind of idealistic woman who, wants to meet the wizard and like become, acclaimed, and instead turns into this kind of activist, political activist, and kind of anarchist, which love that for her. Whereas Glinda also goes through her own kind of journey of becoming less self-absorbed through her relationship with Elphaba, navigating kind of loyalty, ambition, and face. And as the story unfolds, we see their lives shaped by love, passion, betrayal, until we finally have Elphaba kind of giving into her role of wicked. But as Glinda's narration reminds us, the truth is often far more complicated than the legends we are told. Okay, so just to get some credentials out of the way, I'm a huge musical theatre nerd. I grew up reading the L. Frank Baum books. I've read all of the Wizard of Oz books. I watched the movie a lot as a kid, loved it, and I read Wicked, Gregory Maguire's book, when I was 15 or 16, I think. So yeah, I went to go and see Wicked at the West End when I was living in London, and I had a weird experience with it, to be honest. I went to see it unknowingly on a night when it was the last night of a particular cast. So everybody who was there in the audience were people who had seen it a million times, particularly loved this cast, and they were all there to kind of say goodbye to this cast. And so they were doing standing ovations after every single song. There was huge amount of applause after pretty much every single line. So I had no idea what was happening. And basically was just shut up, I can't understand what's happening. But, look, that was my own fault for maybe not doing my research. But it was too expensive to ever go again when there were already so many other musicals that I wanted to go and see. So I never saw it again, which I do really regret because it's amazing. And anyway, I might be going to see the one in Melbourne while it's still here, but beside the point. So I guess what I am saying is I'm not like one of those Wicked fans who has seen it a million times. So if I get anything wrong, I do apologize, and just let me know in the comments. Yes, this is all just my big gay feelings about stuff. And then yes, the movie, I have been to see it twice. I love it so much. Cynthia Erivo is oh my god, I just am obsessed with her. She's amazing. Ariana's fantastic, and I love them both. I think the movie is just phenomenal. Yeah, it's great. Brilliant stuff. Now, seriously, I have been so excited about doing this. It has taken over my whole brain. I For the wonderful people who have joined my channel and started watching, last week I had my first video up, which was about Jane Austen, and I did say that I was going to do another 2 videos about Austen, Pride and Prejudice, and Emma, and I will be doing those. But yeah, I was just I'm so hyper fixated on this. I need to talk about it, and all of my friends are sick and tired of me talking about Wicked and how gay I think it is. So I'm just kind of doing them a favor by putting it here where you guys only have to listen to it once, and maybe you'll enjoy it, and hopefully you've clicked on it because you're interested. So yeah, I went to go and see Wicked at the movies when it first came out, and I just loved it. I was saying to my friend as we were leaving, I don't think I've had that much fun at the movies since at least since I was a kid, but I don't even really remember having a time where I've had that much fun at the movies ever. It was just so good. And so then I went to go and see it again on the weekend, and I just, I was sitting in the movies, writing notes, being yeah, and then at this point their hands touch, and I'm pretty sure that that is a reference to the hands touch lyrics in I'm Not That Girl. So look, I'm going to go slightly crazy, and there's going to be sort of red string. I wish I had a red string board to just go at. But instead it will just be me on this couch talking to you guys about how deeply, deeply this has gone into my brain, and how I don't think I'll ever be the same again, because I am just, oh man, I'm just so obsessed with these lesbians. So obsessed with them. Okay, so let's talk queer coding before I go into my like FBI agent trying to uncover a serial killer version of uncovering this movie's gayness. Uh, and so you can understand where I'm coming from with this. So, I think that often people look at kind of queer coding videos or essays, or people having these conversations, and they go, yeah, but there's no proof of that, and you're like, you're reaching and rah, rah. And so queer coding is like such an important thing to understand when we're talking about these things. It's not yes, sure, an argument could be made that we are like reaching. An argument could be made that maybe we should just go and write fan fiction. And let me tell you, I'm tempted. I haven't written fan fiction since I was 15 years old, but my God, am I like, yeah, Gelphie fan fiction? I'm hoping that by the next time I open Archive of Our Own, there will be at least 10,000 new fan fictions. So maybe I need to add some more. Anyway, sidebar. But yeah, queer coding, for anyone who doesn't know, the kind of originator of this was the famously shit Hays Code. We don't love it, but it has impacted how we see kind of queerness in films and in media and books and things like that. Because yeah, of course, what happens when you impose a moral code on films made in one of the biggest kind of outputs of mainstream media for however long it was that the Hays Code was in effect for, it's going to have a knock-on effect to how people create media. And so that was very clearly the case with how queerness is shown in films, even though the Hays Code is no longer in place. So originally it's this moral code, like an ethical code or whatever. And at the time, people who are queer are seen as degenerates, sick, blah, blah, all the fun stuff. And so it's, baked into the code itself that if you were ever going to show a queer character on screen, audiences are not allowed to feel empathetic for them in any way. So they have to be shown as villainous, disgusting, sick, whatever. Or what you can do, and what a lot of filmmakers did, is you create a character who is not explicitly queer, and you code them in such a way that queer audiences will go, oh, yes, this is based off of stereotyping, which is not great, but we can read into it. We can see by the way that they talk, or the kind of lingering looks, or the way that they hold themselves, or the way that they dress, that they are supposed to be queer. And so straight audiences see them and they go, that's just a straight person. And so that's why kind of queer coding is so important, because that has kind of remained, and that has remained in the way that queer people react to media, I think. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that queer coding is this kind of embedded cultural phenomenon within the queer community. It's not just us putting readings onto characters who are meant to be straight by the actors or by the writers. It's that we have learnt how to read queerness into characters where we're actually supposed to be seeing queerness, because that is how they're being played by the actors, or that is how they've been written by the writers. And maybe that's not always the case. Maybe it's not that it's necessarily been done on purpose. And so, that becomes a kind of complicating factor as well, that, if there was no intention there, does it negate the fact that they still read as queer to a queer audience? I personally don't think so. I think that that's one of the really cool things about queer coding, is that if you see something that resonates with you and your own queer experience, then like, isn't that awesome to then feel like you have a character who represents you, even if they're not openly out? I mean, look, this is probably coming from someone who, I grew up in the 90s and the 2000s, and we didn't have much queer representation. So you get what you can get, and queer coding was like a really important part of that. I just think queer coding is like such a deeply, deeply important part of queer culture. And so I really push back against the idea that we shouldn't look at a character or a film where we see ourselves in it, and that we're kind of like silly for resonating with something and feeling a kind of queerness in that. I'm not pushing it on you, you know? Like if you don't see that, then that's fine. You don't have to. But that's my experience of it. So anyway, that's my little rant. And yeah, my one final thing is just like if you do have any kind of problems with people doing queer readings, and if you have any particular problem with me specifically doing a queer reading of Wicked, then I think just take a moment to ask yourself, especially if you're this far into the video, you know, take a second to ask yourself genuinely because the question that is often put to people who are doing these queer readings is, you know, especially of stories like this where it is about a deep friendship, is that friendships are just as important and platonic love is just as important, and so why do you have to make it gay? Like, why is that? Why do you have to do that? And so the question I would put to you, if you do feel like that, is have you ever asked that question about a man and a woman? Like, ever? Because nobody ever asks that of Elphaba and Fiyero. Nobody makes that argument about, you know, other characters where it's like, well, you know, maybe they're just best friends, and that's just as important. Do you ever have that argument made? No, right? So let me have my fun, okay? Now, very quickly, I just want to talk about Cynthia and Ariana and how they've spoken about the idea of Elphaba and Glinda being in love. So Cynthia has said, I don't think there's anything wrong with celebrating the deep connection that both of them have. I think they do have a real relationship. It is true love, which is probably why people are shipping it, because what they build together is an unbreakable bond. And then Ariana has said that Glinda and Elphaba provide such a safe space for one another, which is what all relationships should be. So, you know, whether it's romantic or platonic, Glinda might be a little in the closet, clock that. But if there were a time, you never know, give it a little more time. It is just a true love, and I think that transcends sexuality. And then the quote about like Glinda being a little bit in the closet, which by the way, like I know that was probably just a throwaway line, but that is hugely how I read Glinda, is that she's a closeted lesbian. Anyway, but we'll go into all of that later. But Kristen Chenoweth, I think Ariana had put that quote up on her Instagram, and then Chenoweth had liked the Instagram post and commented, I thought so too, way back when. So I'm just saying that the people who have played these characters have certainly, like, they're not looking at this and being like, that's crazy. It's, you know, there's a legit kind of thing about this, I guess is all I'm saying. Okay, so now I'm going to go through every single scene and talk about how gay it all is, and I'm going to break it down. I'm going to do a synopsis analysis. So let's start with the first scene, and we'll go through, and hopefully that will all kind of like come together in a way that isn't too sort of disjointed, because you know, your girl likes to go off on a rant and a side story, and personally I just think that makes me really fun and cool to hang out with. But I have gotten feedback that that's annoying, so I'll try to pull back the ADHD and I will try to just stick to script. So the first thing we have is the meltwater left after Elphaba has died and her hat, and then we zoom out into Munchkin Land, where those horrible little creatures have fully bought into the propaganda and are celebrating the death of someone who they bullied relentlessly for her entire life. Not that I'm bitter or anything. And then Glinda arrives in her perfect pink bubble, and I immediately start crying. Okay, so let's talk No One Mourns the Wicked. Oh my god. Oh my god, I cried so much to this. When I've just like listened to the soundtrack, I've always been like, this is a beautiful song, but like I've never felt like such a huge emotion. I think that like seeing Ariana's face so close and like being able to see her expressions and stuff, it's just like, oh man, the emotional like response that I had was crazy. So I think what I will start with saying is that I read somewhere, I don't know if this is completely true, but I feel like it is. So someone said that when Glinda is singing, if she's kind of being untruthful or like she's not being sort of completely emotionally honest or something, she sings in a much higher register. And so at the start of No One Mourns the Wicked, she's like, I think this is like as high as she goes. I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure this is like the highest that she sings throughout the musical. And so that's when she's saying like, let's celebrate. Isn't it great? Shouldn't we all be glad? And so, yeah, side note, because I just saw this recently and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. She has that line, let us be glad, let us be grateful, let us rejoicify that goodness could subdue the wicked workings of you know who. And so she doesn't specifically say that she means Elphaba, right? And this actually is because of the way that the timeline works. So it's after Dorothy has left. The wizard has also gone home, and Glinda has imprisoned Madame Marable. So I actually read that now that someone pointed it out, that when she's saying you know who, she actually means the wizard and possibly Madame Marable as well. She doesn't mean Elphaba. And so again, with the kind of, her using this high tone to sort of lie or like to kind of obfuscate the truth, I just think that that was a really cool little point. And then, so she's walking through the Munchkins and they're all being annoying. And I've remained so bitter about how they treated Elphaba. I can't. And so she's walking through and she's, sort of pretending to be this like benevolent, oh, let me take a flower and aren't we all so glad about the witch dying and blah, blah, blah. She's handed the torch to go and torch this effigy of her friend. And you can see her face drop when she turns away from the Munchkins and she's no longer smiling. And there's this kind of moment of like hesitation before she throws the torch and her voice lowers and she starts singing about how no one mourns the wicked and then she'll die alone. And that to me is when she has started singing about herself, that she is the wicked one in this situation and that she will die alone because what she has done has or what she hasn't done has led to the death of her beloved friend and more, her lover, her girlfriend. So, I cry so much. It's really beautiful and it's really sad and yeah, I love it. And then when the Munchkin girl comes up and she's like, was she really your friend? This is like a recurring theme throughout the musical, but I particularly noticed this on my second watch and I like wrote this note down in the theater, was when she goes, friend? Yes, we were longest pause in fucking history, friends. Which I read as, oh yeah, friends. Yeah, we were friends. That's what you want to call it? Sure. Friends. Put a girl before that, and then yes, that's what we were. Anyway, so then we move to Shiz University and we get Glinda and Elphaba's first meeting and it's iconic and beautiful and we have the you don't understand. I'm obsessed. I don't understand how obsessed I am with this. I feel like I have met my one true love and it's a movie. And, regardless of labels, I think that we can all agree that no matter what we call it, the first moment that Elphaba and Glinda meet, the chemistry, the tension, whether they hate each other or love each other, whether they loathe each other or love each other, there's tension, right? So then Madame Marable decides to teach Elphaba sorcery and also rooms Glinda and Elphaba together, so they're roommates. Wink. And this kind of like really starts off the proper beef between them because Glinda has it's her lifelong dream to be a sorceress, and this is the first time she hasn't got what she wanted because Elphaba is the only one who Madame Marable picks, and so then they're like roommates. There's tension, they're like, Elphaba's just like, you're a pretty little like princess and I don't like you, and Glinda is like, you're weird and also like you got the thing that I wanted and I don't love that. So there's already so much tension. And then we get one of my favorite songs. What is this feeling? And, you know, again, on the thing of like, who knew? So I had heard the song obviously on the soundtrack, but again, it's been one of those ones where I've just been like, hey, it's a fine song, and I've never really like paid that much attention to it, which is crazy because like even just like if I didn't know the full story, you would think that I would have listened to it and been like, that's so gay. And instead I didn't. But anyway, watching it, I was like having to hold on to my friend's hand because I was like, are they gonna kiss? Like, what's happening? Oh my god, I'm like, this is amazing. I mean, not only is this just like the musical equivalent of that Tumblr post, when I was 7, I had a crush on this girl and I didn't know how to handle it, so I just said, get out of my school. It's also just like so clearly a love song. So clearly to me. Anyway. Now, I think I'm physically incapable of trying to say the lyrics of the song out loud without singing them, but I will try one more time. So we have the beginning of the song. They're lying in bed, in their beds near each other in the same room because they are roommates. And especially in the movie, I just think that this was done so well where it's just like so gay. And they're like, you know, lying in bed and they're tossing and turning over the fact that they just like hate each other so much. And the lyrics go, what is this feeling so sudden and new? I felt the moment I laid eyes on you. My pulse is rushing, my head is reeling, my face is flushing. What is this feeling? Does it have a name? Yes. Yes. Loathing. Such a good song. But also, is it loathing? Is it really? Toss. Is it really? No, I don't think it is. It's loving. It's a love song. Now, is this a case of useless lesbians failing to understand their feelings for each other? Is it resentment at the fact that they have these feelings and the other one has caused them and they don't want to feel these feelings because they're closeted? I don't know. Maybe it's one of those two. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's something straight. I don't think so, personally. So for anybody who has been on any kind of like a Gelphie TikTok or Instagram or anything for like the last 2 minutes, you probably already know that What Is This Feeling is structured very similarly to love songs from other musicals. So Stephen Schwartz has even said that What Is This Feeling is kind of structured after 10 minutes ago from Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, the excellent one with Brandy. It's also tonally reminiscent of People Will Say We're in Love from Oklahoma and If I Loved You from Carousel, both of which end with the straight couple getting together. Stacey Wolf talks about this in Defying Gravity, Queer Conventions in the musical Wicked, when she says, when the number turns into a hate song like those early hypothetical love duets in musicals such as Carousel's If I Loved You and Guys and Dolls' I'll Know, Wicked signals that it will follow the conventions of a mid-20th century musical theatre, but queerly, with two women as the musical's couple. And look, yes, I have seen a million people argue that this is just a tonal reversal and it's meant to be funny. And the idea is that it's like, oh yeah, in a, you know, straight musical, this would be the like love song where we go, oh, they hate each other, oh, they love each other. And then in reality, it's like the thing that is funny about it is that like, oh, they really actually hate each other. But one, I mean, I have a bit of a problem with the fact that like the kind of humor of this comes from the idea that it's like two women, so therefore we have to go, oh well, but they can't actually be in love, right? Because it's like that's the comedy of the moment, is that this can't be a love song, and therefore they must actually genuinely hate each other. And also, you know, this was written in 2003, so like times change. Maybe that was the original intent of it. I think that Stephen Schwartz has said that it was meant to be kind of a comedic song, but I think the author is dead, and I reckon that we need to think about like how different people act these things. So I feel like Cynthia and Ariana acted it in a very different way to Kristen and Adele Dazeem, my love. But you have to think about not only intent, but also audience reaction. And my audience reaction is that they're gay. So when the rest of the student body starts singing along with Glinda as the kind of chorus line, and they're like, we share your feeling, we loathe her as well. I think it's interesting that so Glinda and Elphaba start singing the melody line, which is different to the chorus line, obviously, but the chorus line is kind of doing the initial verse, which is loathing, we loathe you, blah blah blah, whereas Glinda's and Elphaba's has turned into back into the what is this feeling section of it, where it reads as romantic. I mean, I just think like the ending lines of there's a strange exhilaration in such total detestation. It's so pure and so strong. Yes, I do admit it came on fast, but I still believe it can last. Like it's just so love songy. It gives me so much life. But yeah, I do think it's interesting that there's like a bit of a tonal shift to me, where it's like that the chorus line are like still believing that this is like, oh yeah, you genuinely do loathe each other, whereas Glinda and Elphaba have changed into more of a like, oh, we're back on our like, what do these feelings actually mean? Oh yeah, it's definitely loathing, right? Yeah, these strong, intense feelings that I'm having for this other girl. It has to be loathing. Yeah. Couldn't be anything else. Just a thought. And then also I noted this when I was watching for the second time. I wrote it down in my little diary while I was watching in the theater, that at the end of the song, Elphaba is standing up in a balcony and talking to Madame Marable, and Glinda finishes her verse with the kind of entirety of the student body walking behind her downstairs, looking up at Elphaba, and it's so Romeo and Juliet coded. Like, again, just a thought. And I also think it's important to note that it's pre-Fiyero's entrance. So we're establishing Glinda and Elphaba's relationship first, before the love interest turns up. So their relationship, regardless of how you perceive it as like romantic or platonic, their relationship is the core of the show. Their relationship is the most important. Theirs is the one that is established first. His is secondary, right? Now, I think obviously it's clear that there's sort of humor in this, and that the humor of it is the reading of it as, oh, we're saying loathing, and it sounds like a love song, but it's not, and blah blah blah, and that's how the straights see it. But I think that if Elphaba and Glinda were straight, if it was a man and a woman playing that role, then it wouldn't even be a question. You would know that this was the sign that this was going to be an enemies to lovers romance, and that they would be together by the end of the musical, at the end of the film. So I just think, once again, it's the queer coding for me. I read this article on Autostraddle by Christina Tucker the other day, which was really great. And she was talking about her first experience of seeing Wicked, the musical, on Broadway when she was a teenager, and when she first saw this song, and that she didn't know like what to expect or anything. And so she was kind of sitting there initially being like, oh my God, is this going to be gay? And the like that, great kind of teenage experience of being like, nobody realizes that I'm like so excited about the idea this might be gay, right? Which is a normal straight thing to think, because straight people really care about gay. I'm just an ally, and I really care about gay representation. That's what this is. So they say, the lyrics continued, loathing, I was outraged. That was cheating. They'd tricked me, but then it clicked, and it felt like I'd discovered something, a secret wrapped in wordplay I can now admit is over the top. A wink, just for the people in the know. It was the first time I remember recognizing subtext in real time. And like, that's the thing, right? It's all about the queer coding. It's subtext. And I love subtext. Gay subtext. Also, it's cute as hell, and they clearly want to kiss the entire song. And I will take no further questions. Thank you. All right, so then we have Dr. Dillamond, who is one of the only remaining animal teachers at the school. He's a goat, and he tells them that like something terrible is happening in Oz, and all of the animals have stopped being able to speak, and that they're kind of disappearing. And this begins Elphaba's kind of activism arc. So this has nothing to do with Glinda and Elphaba, but it is important to their story and why the choices that they make are made. Okay, so the main thing that stands in the way of most people reading Glinda and Elphaba as being a romantic couple is, of course, Fiyero, who is both Glinda and Elphaba's love interest. They're in a love triangle, which, whatever. And I want to argue why his presence does not negate the fact that Elphaba and Glinda are in love with each other. And I have many points, so let's go through them. Okay, so Prince Fiyero begins attending Shiz University. And so not only do I think that Glinda and Elphaba's relationship can coexist queerly with their relationship to Fiyero, I think there's also a considerable amount of subtext to suggest that both women are not actually attracted to Fiyero at all. I particularly feel this about Glinda. I think that Glinda is like much more clearly a closeted lesbian. I think there's a lot more proof of that. I think Elphaba is a little bit more, she's a little bit harder to define. And like, I have no problem with her being bisexual. I have no problem with the idea of her and Fiyero and Glinda being in a throuple. But I think that there are some signs that that is not the case. So first of all, in terms of Glinda's attraction to Fiyero, I think this is the most obvious in this section. So we have before Fiyero even arrives, Elphaba and Fiyero have had a like momentary little interaction where she has been like, "You're kind of the worst," and thinks that he's arrogant and is not interested in him at all. And then Glinda, her first kind of hint that he is going to be at the school is that she sees in the newspaper that he's enrolled. And she immediately, she hasn't met him yet, she doesn't know anything about him, she immediately decides that she is going to be in a relationship with him. So she, gets herself all dressed up, she goes down and she immediately is like, I'm going to get this man, I'm going to flirt with him, blah, blah, blah. So it's not about her actually liking Fiyero. It's not about actually being attracted to him, which to me, again, more signs that she's a closeted lesbian. Even as we see in Popular, which I'm skipping forward a little bit, but Glinda is determined to marry Fiyero even before they have like properly started dating. And I think all of this really indicates that to her, she sees it as he's like the kind of upper echelon of like the most popular boy in school. She's the most popular girl in school. Optically, it looks good for them to be together. And in Dancing Through Life, there's the line, you're perfect, so we're perfect together. Again, it's not to do with his personality, it's not to do with like who he is as a person, it's not even to do with what he looks like or anything like that. It's just that he represents this kind of like idealized perfection, as does she, therefore it makes sense that they would be together. It's all about optics. Okay, so then we have the iconic ozdust ballroom scene. Glinda plays a practical joke on Elphaba, which is very mean, and she invites her to come to the ozdust ballroom with Fiyero and with all of the other people who are coming, and she gives her this ugly hat, which is the iconic witch's hat, knowing that people will make fun of her for wearing it. And the kind of ironic twist of all of this is that Elphaba, who has hated Glinda up until this point, has found out that Glinda is the reason that her sister Nessa Rose has gotten a date for that night, and that Nessa Rose has asked her to be nice to Glinda, and so she, in her, kindness, has gone to Madame Marable and said, help Glinda to become a sorceress or I'll leave. And Marable, who really wants to have Elphaba's power, although we don't know this until later, is like, all right, I'll do anything, even though she doesn't want Glinda to be in her class. So just before Elphaba arrives in the movie, Marable turns up to the ozdust ballroom and she tells her that she is able to join the class and that it's because of Elphaba asking. So Glinda then feels really bad. And now I have seen a number of people argue that Glinda is just purely wicked, and that this is the kind of that she's the sort of the true villain of the piece. And look, I don't want to say that people are bad at media literacy, but people are bad at media literacy. Like, I think that genuinely, if you think about it, like, not to be a dick, but the whole point of the story is about wickedness as a concept, right? And it's that we are all shades of grey as people. None of us are truly wicked. None of us are truly good. Glinda is a very complex character. She is not someone who is as good as she is kind of perceived to be by the people around her at all. She makes some very terrible choices. But she's also not bad. She's not a bad person. And I know there's a lot of people who really, really disagree with that. But I just think that that's a I think that that's a very kind of black and white way of looking at characterizations, and I don't hugely find it very interesting um, to kind of just decide that a character is like one thing and one thing only, um, and particularly not just bad and that's it, and that they're just a terrible person, and therefore that Glinda is a bad friend, and that she has only ever been bad to Elphaba, and all of that kind of stuff that I've seen argued. I just don't think that that's true, and I think it's just a very it's a very teenage kind of reading, and that's not a read that is like I remember that that's how I used to think about things, was that it was like there was this kind of moralistic purity in feeling like I don't like that character, and therefore the reason that I don't like them is because they are a bad person, because then you had the kind of moral superiority of being like, well, I don't like them because they're not morally good, and rather than just going, I just don't like them and they're not for me, and they can still be complex, and that other things can be kind of going on for them, but I don't like them, you know? So anyway, that's my little rant about Glinda, but I've just been seeing a lot of that lately. I don't know if that's new. Maybe not. Maybe this has been going on since 2003, but it feels like it's kind of newish. But again, I've been seeing a lot of like stuff about Wicked on my timeline, so maybe it's just that. The reason that I bring this up is because I have seen people argue that Glinda is not genuine in her like reaction to her guilt, and that the only reason that she's then nice to Elphaba is because she's guilty, and that's it. And what I would argue is that someone who is not a nice person, who is just a mean girl, one, like, yes, they might feel guilty for a moment and then, you know, try and do something to kind of like pretend that they're a good person to themselves. But I don't think that they would do what Glinda does, which is to humiliate herself for Elphaba. And I think that that's a really, really important moment in the story, is that we see Glinda, whose whole identity is wrapped up in how she's perceived. Elphaba is the only person who we ever see her willing to humiliate herself for. And that's a really important thing. It might not feel like it to people who, you know, want someone to be like a really good person. Like, it's, you know, it's bare minimum in some ways, but it is important. It is important for the type of character that she is, and this is the beginning of her character arc to becoming a better person. So, you know, I think that's important to note. So when Elphaba does arrive and all of the students are making fun of her, and it's really awful and really sad, and she starts doing that dance, which they're all continuing to kind of make fun of her for, Fiyero says, you know, oh, you have to say one thing for her. She doesn't give a twig what anybody else thinks. And Glinda says, no, she does totally care what people think. I think that's a really important moment as well, because Fiyero, who's supposed to be the love interest to both of them, has misread who Elphaba is fundamentally. He has seen her as this person who, like, oh, she doesn't care what anybody thinks. She's, you know, like, it's very the cool girl thing. She like, and I think it's one of the reasons why he becomes kind of so fascinated with her. Also because she's great and amazing, and like, you know, but I think there's a, like, it's such a kind of classic, you know, male thing to look at that as a sort of manic pixie dream girl version of someone who is just actually a real person, and to be like, oh, she'll just do whatever because she doesn't care what anybody thinks at all. And Glinda is the one to be like, she really understands who Elphaba actually is, and she understands Elphaba's actual feelings, and she's the one who says, no, she deeply, deeply cares. And so then she knows how hurt Elphaba must be feeling, and how, this awful kind of moment of her feeling so ostracized by all of the people there. And I think it's not actually, to me, I don't read it as that's her guilt at the moment that makes her step in. I think that's her possibly for the first time experiencing empathy. But it's the empathy moment for her to go, this person who I didn't really understand properly now I really understand what that feeling is. So anyway, so she steps in and she begins to dance with Elphaba, and her friends both tell her to stop because they know that this could ruin Glinda's reputation, and that's when she refuses. So that's when you see that Glinda knows, and I mean the way that Ariana acted as well, you can see like Glinda knows that this could really humiliate her, and instead she is like, no, I'm doing this. This is the right thing to do. And not even that it's the right thing to do. I think that she genuinely, it's such a moment of connection between Elphaba and Glinda. Um, like it's just actually them both fully understanding each other for the first time, I think. Um, it's really beautiful and I love it a lot. So when they have their first hands touching moment, again, when I saw it for the second time in the movies, it was like my brain went like a rah, and I was like, oh my God, hands touch, eyes meet. Like it's the lyrics from I'm Not That Girl, but it's the two of them. And so, yeah, I just think that that is a little thing to think about. I think again with like how, you know, we look at the mirroring of like what is this feeling to love songs from other musicals, the dance scene is also a mirror to the kind of dance scenes that you see in other kind of musical love stories like The King and I and West Side Story, that kind of thing, where the first dance between the couple is the one which solidifies them as a couple. And I think it's really important that we see that, so they have this dance, Fiyero is watching, but he's not a part of it. And then Elphaba and Glinda leave together, hand in hand, and they leave Fiyero behind. So to me, I see that as they're choosing each other over him, as they do throughout the musical again and again. So then we get the iconic popular. And just before that, there were a few moments that I was like, oh, these are so lovely. So like when Glinda is kind of having her like moment on the bed, Elphaba looks at her with this like just beautiful like fondness, which I just think was really sweet and kind of just goes to show like how much that dance like shifted the way that they see each other. You know, like before, Elphaba would have been looking at Glinda as this like just ridiculous, over the top kind of thing, and now she's seeing what this really is and being like, oh, like that's something to kind of love about you, is your ridiculousness, and that she finds it funny and kind of like beautiful. And then I think it's also really important to think about the way that they talk to each other. I mean, Glinda tells a sort of silly secret, but Elphaba tells Glinda something really like a proper secret. She tells her something that she hasn't told anybody else before, something that's like really, really personal. And um and yeah, I think that that goes to show that she has like switched in her mind quite quickly to being like, this is someone that I can trust. And you know, the fact that like, and I think that that's represented through what they've been through with this dance together, which is that she knows that Glinda has her, like Glinda is able to kind of hold her there. And so then she's showing kind of her willingness to then be like, all right, great, here's this thing that I've never told anybody else. And that I think that it's really nice that Glinda reacts in a way that's actually quite serious as well. She doesn't kind of take it in a totally flippant way. Like, you know, she's a funny character, and so there's sort of some jokes and stuff in there, but it's the fact that she really seriously says, that might be your secret, but that doesn't mean that it's true. And that one to me always like really gets me, because it's like, yeah, it's so true. These things that you can hold for yourself, these stories that you tell yourself about who you are and the like maybe mistakes that you've made or the things that you've done wrong or something, especially for something as like which really has nothing to do with you, which is your own kind of birth, and the choices that your parents made. To have someone tell you, that might be something that you tell yourself, but that doesn't mean it's true. Like, that's really lovely. Makes me cry. Makes me cry. Now, so then we go into popular, and I have seen some people argue that this is kind of like a butch femme kind of dynamic, and I think that's really funny, especially because like I just think that they're both so femme. It's just that Elphaba's a goth about it. But thematically, I think that it does make sense in a kind of gender way. Obviously, Elphaba does not present butch, but there's a kind of gendered thing around how she, Glinda is this like hyper femme, uh, extremely feminine presenting, and Elphaba does not show interest in that in the same way, whether through genuinely not caring about it or not feeling comfortable in it, um, or possibly feeling like it's not for her, which we then see with the I'm Not That Girl. So, I think that's all really interesting. And I also think it's really interesting to think of Popular as being Glinda trying to kind of impose femininity onto Elphaba. Uh, in the kind of initial section of the song, and then we have the moment where you know they like I really loved the choice that Ariana and Cynthia made to like be so close to each other at this moment where they do the rose in the hair, because I've seen in most musicals it's kind of like a Elphaba sitting on the bed and Glinda is standing and then kind of steps away to look at her. So I really love how like just intimate the moment is. It's really beautiful. Um, but Glinda really sincerely looking into the mirror at Elphaba with their heads together and saying, "You're beautiful." And that to me, I think is like such a like it's so important to think about the fact that actually she didn't change anything about Elphaba. She doesn't look any different. She hasn't been kind of changed in any way. She had her glasses taken off, but I think that's it. And that Glinda is like looking at her really sincerely saying, "You're beautiful," um, and that's such an indicator of like she didn't actually need to change, and Glinda still sees how beautiful she is, and it's all just about how we shift the way that we see people because of who they are to us, um, i.e., their girlfriends. Also, I think like it's such an important thing to note that the rose that Glinda gives Elphaba is the one that Fiyero gave to her at the beginning of the night. So one, I think of it as a suggestion of kind of romantic intent because that's what it was with Fiyero to Glinda. And also, I think it shows that she doesn't really give a shit about Fiyero. It's another sign of that because if she did, she would have held on to it and it would have been like something that was kind of special because that's their first date, right? And instead, it's something that she's immediately willing to give up to Elphaba. Okay, so then we get I'm Not That Girl, which I have a lot of thoughts about. So Dr. Dillamond is taken away and his human replacement shows the students this new invention called a cage, which has a lion cub in it, which, spoiler alert, is the cowardly lion as a baby. And the idea of the cage is that it's a new invention that will stop animals being able to talk. So Elphaba, in her like absolute fury over all of this, accidentally poppies everybody to sleep except for Fiyero, and she and Fiyero go on a little adventure with the lion cub to free him. Which also I didn't really think about this until the other day when one of my friends pointed this out, and she was like, they just like drop the cub into like a random forest somewhere. He's like gonna die. And I mean, we know he didn't because he turns into the cowardly lion, but like maybe that's why he's so cowardly because like what a life he's had to live. Anyway, so then Fiyero and Elphaba have a little moment, and then Fiyero leaves and Elphaba starts singing this song called I'm Not That Girl. And you wouldn't think that a love song between a heterosexual couple could be queer coded, but I am here to tell you, you are wrong. Now, initially, I think I was like, yeah, okay, I read Glinda as being a closeted lesbian and has no real interest in Fiyero, and that Elphaba is bisexual and is kind of interested in both of them. But when I was really listening to I'm Not That Girl again, I was like, actually, I think it's a little more complex than that. I feel like I'm Not That Girl is almost like about the theoretical idea of a relationship rather than wanting specifically Fiyero. So, her saying he could be that boy, but I'm not that girl. It's like he could be that boy in a broad sense. He could be the boy in a romantic relationship. but I'm not that girl. It's not specifically about him, it's about the idea of like wanting to be in a socially acceptable relationship in general, and feeling like, oh, he could be someone that I could have a crush on, but I'm not the kind of person who anyone would have a crush on back. And now I'm not saying that this is something that cuts really deep and reminds me a lot of my own experiences and I relate to a lot, but I'm just saying that I feel like I remember the kind of compet crushes that I used to have as a teenager on boys who were like way too popular and good looking to ever be interested in me. And so they were quite safe to have crushes on, because I knew that nothing would ever really happen. Now, I think that Elphaba desperately wants to be normal. She wants to be liked by others. She wants to be degreenified. She wants people to just kind of see her as she really is. And I think Fiyero is representative of that. It's not specifically about him, but it's about what he represents. And the lyrics are really about Glinda. They're not about Fiyero. They're not like, we don't hear anything specifically about like why she's attracted to Fiyero specifically. It's actually about Glinda, who she is, and why Elphaba can't be her. And I would argue why she can't be with her. And I think the lyrics are as much about Elphaba's longing for Glinda's social ease, her beauty, her kind of effortless charm, than it is about Fiyero. And in fact, I would argue much more about that. And so, yeah, I think that Elphaba's kind of fixation on Fiyero is more of a lens through which we can look at her feelings of inferiority as well as her admiration of Glinda. Her repeatedly singing "I'm Not That Girl" feels less like she's sad about not being able to get Fiyero than it is that she's sad about not being able to be like or be with Glinda. The lyrics are so focused on Glinda that I just don't think that this is a straightforward love song. I think it's about Glinda. By which I mean it is a love song. It's just not about Fiyero. Also a note that in the movie, when Glinda wakes up from the poppies and she's alone, she looks to Elphaba's side first before she looks to Fiyero's. And I just think that's interesting. All right, so now we move on, and Elphaba is invited to go to the Emerald City to meet the Wizard of Oz. She's extremely excited about this. This is really great. This is like her whole dream. This is what she's been dreaming about for her whole life. And so, given that this is the thing she's been dreaming of for her whole life, I think the scene at the train is very interesting. So, yes, there's this moment between Fiyero and Elphaba at the train station, which Glinda also wants to be a part of. So, the whole love triangle situation, or throuple, who knows. But I think it's really important to note that Elphaba invites Glinda to go to the Emerald City with her. She doesn't invite Fiyero. Once again, this is another example, as like with the Ozdust Ballroom, where Elphaba and Glinda are the two. They're the ones who are together. Fiyero is left on the outside because he's not as important. They are the two who are the most important to each other because they're in love. I also thought, like, before Elphaba invites Glinda onto the train, her doing the like hand movement from the dance and Glinda repeating it is just so cute. And I think I might be remembering this wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's Elphaba who is watching Glinda first, and Glinda's kind of looking around, and Elphaba is just focused on her, and then Glinda looks to her and they make eye contact, and that's when she does the hand movement. And it's just so like, these other people don't matter, you're the one who matters. It's really sweet, it's really romantic, I love them. And then we get One Short Day when they get to the Emerald City, and it is just so queer coded to me. It's just so small town queer couple coming to a big city for the first time being like, oh my god, did you realize that like a city like this existed, and this is where all of our dreams are going to come true. We should move here for college and we can be in a relationship and nobody will know. Like, it's so queer coded. And the way that the lyrics are like, it's all about we. It's not them separately being like, oh, I really love this place, I want to come back here. In these lyrics of where so many roam to, we'll call it home to. And then just like now we can say, we're just two friends, two good friends, two best friends. And once again, Every single time they say friends, it's said, we're just two friends, too good, friends, too best, friends, like girls. Be for real. Be for real. Also, the way that they hold hands everywhere that they go from like as soon as they've finished the popular is just so extremely cute and gay to me. And I know that platonic friends do this too because I also do this, but I just think it's really cute. And so, like, yeah, we don't need to make it gay, but I'm gonna make it gay because I think it's really cute. I just do. Okay, so then we get the full plot. Wizard is evil. He tricks Elphaba into using the groomery to make the flying monkeys. And then he is uncovered, and we find out that he actually has no powers. And Elphaba decides to leave, and Marable and the wizard decide, well, we can't have her leave and telling everybody all of this, so instead we will paint her as the villain. And so that's what they do. And so then we get Defying Gravity, which, oh my god, in the cinemas, it was like I'd taken something. I just don't know what the feeling was that I had. It was so full body. It was amazing. I mean, yeah, Cynthia Erivo in Defying, I mean, she's a fantastic singer in all of her songs, but Defying Gravity is just like beyond. My singing teacher was telling me later about her tongue placement, and I was like, yeah, I can tell Cynthia knows about tongue placement, if you know what I mean. Okay, now, and I think this is the first time that I brought up the book because so far it hasn't mattered too much because most of the reading that I've been able to do is from the musical and the film. But in the book, the moment where Glinda and Elphie say goodbye to each other, there's a kiss. And now it's unclear where Elphaba kisses her, whether she kisses her on the lips, whether she kisses her on the cheek or something like that. I personally read it as a kiss on the lips. Some people do not. So in the book, the scene reads like this, and you can tell me what you think. She put her face against Glinda's and kissed her. Hold out if you can, she murmured, and kissed her again. Hold out, my sweet. So cute. Also on the same page of the hold out, my sweet moment in the book, I just think this paragraph is really telling. Glinda craned her head to see Elphaba drift back into the crowds. For all her singularity of complexion, it was astounding how quickly she became camouflaged in the ragamuffin variety of street life in the Emerald City. Or maybe it was foolish tears blurring Glinda's vision. Elphaba hadn't cried, of course. Her head had turned away quickly as she stepped down, not to hide her tears, but to soften the fact of their absence. But the sting to Glinda was real. And I just I just love that because it's just like Glinda, like that to me is one of the moments where I'm like, the closeted lesbian theory is so real, because it's like they've kissed goodbye. Glinda has started crying because she already feels like, oh my god, I might never see you again. And then Elphaba, she knows that Elphaba hasn't cried and in fact has turned away to hide the fact that she's not crying because she knows that it will hurt Glinda that she isn't. But that Glinda still feels the sting of that. Just take a moment. Okay. And then so back to pre the kiss. I think the moment in Defying Gravity, which of course is the most kind of queer coded, is the fact that Elphaba asks Glinda to come with her. And I think that it could be read as a romantic thing. It's, will you come with me and be with me? And Glinda refusing, not saying that she's refusing, not saying that out loud, but just not speaking, which is such a lovely choice. And that Glinda saying no is her choosing heterosexuality and to stay in the closet, which I personally think is solidified by the fact that in Act 2, spoilers, she agrees to marry Fiyero purely for what that is perceived as, for the optics of that. And now thanks to Troy Zaher, I think that's how you pronounce his name. Sorry if that's incorrect, on TikTok. I just needed to have it in here because it's just so great. But I'll put a link to his TikTok so you can go and see his arguments about it because they're really, really great. But yeah, I just think, it's again back to the argument of people thinking that Glinda is just a fundamentally selfish person and the reason that she chooses not to go is just because she's selfish. Is that actually, if we look at the lyrics of Defying Gravity, it's more complex than that. So right at the beginning when she says, I hope you're happy. Now you've hurt your cause forever. So she sees Elphaba having kind of said no to the wizard and telling him to bugger off, basically, is that she's hurt her cause for helping the animals, because now she has no power behind her. She and now is actively going to have less than she even did before. So what could she possibly do now with this cause? And to be honest, I think there's a real argument to be made for that. And obviously, this isn't a choice that Elphaba could make any differently. It's fundamentally opposed to who she is as a character. It would be going against her morals and her ethics, but also because specifically at this point, as we can see from the lyrics of Defying Gravity, this is like her breaking point. I can't play by the rules of someone else's game. I can't do what other people say is the right thing to do anymore, because this is the right thing to do, and so I have to go and and try to do something different and try to save these animals. But the way that Glinda sees it, I'm not saying 100% one way or other, because the whole point of this, right, is it's about politics. It's about perception and power, and like how politicians are fundamentally useless, but also that activists can be as well. Because in the end, neither Glinda nor Elphaba are really successful in what they wanted to achieve. So it's sort of showing that if you want to change things, if you want to do good, that sometimes there's just not really a way to do that at all. And that it's, again, it's the whole thing of it's not black and white. These things are really complicated. But I think that the way that Glinda sees it is that by leaving, Elphaba has lost this opportunity where she could have become close to the wizard. She could have used that power that she was like on the cusp of getting, that social power of being associated with the wizard, and also of having the wizard in her pocket, possibly, if she'd played her cards right, that she could have either convinced him to let the animals go so that he would, because he wanted to use her power. So like, what a great bargaining chip she has there. Or she could have killed him because she's in close with him at that point. Or she could have like done a long game of like seeding distrust about who the wizard is, because now she knows the truth. So there's all these different options. And obviously this isn't said explicitly, but I think that because we know that Glinda's whole game is social power, that's how she runs everything. She was able to change the perception, the public perception of Elphaba so quickly, like within the length of a single song of Popular, that everybody then likes her at the end of it, and she hasn't really changed. It's all about perception. So Glinda's power is in that, and so she can't understand how Elphaba, who has never had that social power, how she could choose something different. And the line about delusions of grandeur is her saying, like, yes, I can see that you think you're powerful enough magically to be able to change something and to make this decision and do something different with your magic to help the animals. But like, you don't know, you're thinking above like what the reality might be. And of course, Elphaba is not in the moral wrong for choosing this. I think that, it's an absolutely understandable choice that she makes. I personally, look, certain work that I have done, I have been like, I just can't be a part of it anymore. I can't do the thing of trying to change things from the inside. It's too hard. It feels like I'm not making any difference, and it feels like uh, you're kind of stomped on from everybody within the system to be telling you to like shut up and not try and change things, and that if you want to, you just don't belong there. And so it can feel like the only option is to come out and just burn the whole world down, right? So I absolutely get it, but it's not a strategic choice, and so it's yeah, it's an interesting one to think about. Like, once again, this is the kind of thing around, none of these choices are the absolute right, none of these choices are the absolute wrong ones to make. And so then what's so great about Defying Gravity, if you take this reading, and so again, this was partly what Troy has said, but this is something that I have definitely thought before as well. So when they have the lyric shift and it's, together we're unlimited, together, if we worked in tandem, we'll be the greatest team there's ever been, there's no fight we cannot win. Like, and that's the shift. It's not so when Glinda says no and she says she's not coming, I think a lot of people read that as she's gone, well, I'm not working with you, and I can't, and so I'll stay, and like and she's choosing to go against Elphaba. I think that's how a lot of people read it. But to me, I actually read that as no, they've had a silent conversation with each other. They both understand. When we start the story, Glinda wants what Elphaba has, magical power, and Elphaba wants what Glinda has, social power. And so to me, their moment when they say together we're unstoppable, if we work in tandem, it's because they both know that each one has something that the other doesn't. And that hasn't changed, um that Glinda has this social power, but Elphaba has this huge magical power. Um, and the thing is that Glinda knows that if she was to leave with Elphaba, she would become functionally quite useless in their fight to help the animals, which also, note, isn't actually the thing that Glinda hugely cares about. She just cares about Elphaba. And so she's willing to kind of help her with that, but it's not her cause. But so what they've decided, unspoken, is that the way that they can work in tandem, the way they can work together, is for Elphaba to leave and use her huge magical power, and for Glinda to stay, work within the system, and use her social power. Because if she left with Elphaba, she loses all social power. She becomes useless. She's not a strong witch, so she wouldn't be able to help Elphaba in any like meaningful way with that. All she would be support and a friend, which is nice to have, but isn't really like useful when you're talking about trying to overthrow a government, you know? Now, this is where the movie ends, and this is where Act 1 of the musical ends. And so Act 2, which will focus on kind of the defrauding of the wizard and all of that, will, I think, make it a lot more understandable for people who maybe don't like Glinda and don't understand the choices that she's made to sort of see what she has done. It's still subtle, so I think maybe people will still argue that they don't think that she did anything. But look, I just think that I think that that's the way I read it, is that they made the choices that they did around the kind of power that they do have, and that I think Glinda still really regrets the way that she goes about it, because I think that she becomes complicit in the system by working within it, even though she is fundamentally trying to help Elphaba. So, it's an interesting one. And like, when people argue about the fact that Glinda doesn't tell the Munchkins, or she doesn't tell people like that the propaganda is wrong and that Elphaba isn't wicked, that's actually due to the fact that in Act 2 they do see each other again, and Elphaba tells Glinda, don't change the narrative about me, because that's what's helpful. It's helpful to have, as we see the wizard saying, it's good to have a really good enemy. So she's willing to play that part. She's willing to be the good enemy for the state so that she can more easily help the animals. So it's something that she's asked Glinda to do for her, and Glinda has complied with that. And I think that part of the like deep tragedy in No One Mourns the Wicked is her going, you told me to do this, and yet now you're dead and I'm alone, and maybe I made the wrong choice after all. So in Act 2, we don't really see Glinda and Elphaba interact all that much. And look, there's lots of different things that go on, but I think the main thing that is like the most kind of important queer reading of this is for good. So this is just before Dorothy kills Elphaba. And basically Glinda has arrived to try and tell Elphaba that she's in a lot of danger, and that Dorothy's after her, and the wizard and Morrible are after her. And Elphaba basically is like, right, I guess I have to surrender. And unknown to Glinda, she fakes her death. But so before this, they sort of share this tearful goodbye, and Glinda, thinking this is the last time she's ever going to see her, they sing For Good, which is very beautiful. Elphaba, first of all, talks about, she admits that she is limited, like as a reprise from unlimited. And she realizes, and this again is where I feel like it's really clear that they both know their parts to play. And so Elphaba has realized that she's not as powerful as she thought, but also that the lack of the social power that she has is one of the reasons why she is so limited. Um, and then saying, but look at what you can do, Glinda. This is the power that you have that I don't. So together we could really make a change. And Glinda sings this, and I cry every time. I've heard it said that people come into our lives for a reason, bringing something we must learn, and we are led to those who help us most to grow, if we let them and we help them in return. Well, I don't know if I believe that's true, but I know I'm who I am today because I knew you. Oh my god, I'm going to cry. Like a comet pulled from orbit as it passes the sun, like a stream that meets a boulder halfway through the wood, who can say if I've been changed for the better? But because I knew you, I have been changed for good. Oh my god, I'm so hormonal. And then Elphaba sings, it well may be that we will never meet again in this lifetime, so let me say before we part, so much of me is made of what I learnt from you. You'll be with me like a handprint on my heart. And now, whatever way our stories end, I know you have rewritten mine by being my friend. Like a ship blown from its mooring by a wind off the sea, like a seed dropped by a skybird in a distant wood. Who can say if I've been changed for the better? But because I knew you, I have been changed for good. I genuinely cannot get through that without crying. Oh my god, I'm so hormonal. And then they both apologize to each other for anything that they might have done that has hurt the other person. But just say it doesn't matter because of who they were to each other. And I just think, let's be real, describing someone as leaving a handprint on your heart, that's really romantic and beautiful, and they're in love, okay? Okay, now I'm going to do a quick wrap up around specifically Elphaba's queer coding and specifically Glinda's queer coding after everything that we've learnt about every queer coding little moment. And now I think with the casting of the wonderful Cynthia Erivo, it would be absolutely remiss of me not to note that she is Black code, and there's very strong themes of racism through the book, the musical, and the film. Gregory Maguire's book had very strong themes of anti-Semitism through it, as did the musical. And like, I think the concept of the Wicked Witch of the West is one of like the most well-known sort of anti-Semitic witch stereotypes that there is. I think that these themes can carry over to any people of color, so I really don't want to dismiss that. I think it's very important. I think Elphaba represents discrimination in full, and I think, yeah, her story feels really relatable to any minority group or people or anybody who's felt othered. But yeah, I just think that that's a really important thing to note before I go into any kind of queer coding sort of stuff as well. So along with that, it does really resonate strongly with queer experiences. She's a deeply misunderstood outsider, just like many of us, and she's just yearning for connection in a world that rejects her for who she is. She denies societal norms, she refuses to conform, she struggles to claim her own identity, and that like resonates so deeply with queer experience. And I think that the intensity of her relationship with Glinda, like that just extremely strong friendship, it's, yes, it could be read as platonic, but I dare you to ask any queer woman about the friendship of their life that was so deeply, deeply queer coded, and find me a single one who doesn't have one of those. Now, Elphaba is, just in terms of queerness in general, she's actually coded in the book as being intersex. After her birth, there's a paragraph here that says, "Another willful boy," said the fishwife, sighing. "Shall we kill it?" "Don't be so nasty to it," said the crone. "It's a girl." "Huh," said the bleary-eyed maiden. "Look again, there's the weather vane." For a minute they were in disagreement, even with the child naked before them. And then when Fiyero and Elphaba, there's a like sex scene between them, he is like looking at her asleep. "There was an odd shadow near the groin, or was it a scar?" Now, I think it's quite clear that I've had a lot more to say about Glinda, and that's not really by design. I don't prefer either of them over each other, but I think Elphaba's a much harder character to read, and so she's not as emotionally open, and so there's it's a little harder to kind of read specifically into what she's feeling because it's kind of hard to tell. But yeah, I will just say once again that I think that um, I have complicated feelings around whether the relationship with Fiyero is like a genuine one or not, whether she actually loves him or not. I think an argument can definitely be made that she's bisexual and that her relationship with Glinda is this kind of another thing. And but yeah, I think that I've been leaning more and more towards, I think that she sees Fiyero as something, he's just representative of something. He's representative of what it would be like to feel normal, and to not feel othered, and to be in a relationship that was just like, you know, with someone who's uh so clearly appropriate. Like if she was in a relationship with Fiyero, no one could say a word about like who he was or anything like that, because it would just be so clear that he was like the perfect person, you know? Um, and so I don't think that that's really anything to do with him. I think it's more to do with what she wants, which is to be normal and accepted. And then when it comes to Glinda's queer coding, I just think that it's so clear to me that she is a closeted lesbian. I mean, she's a perfectionist. She presents this idealized version of herself. She lies to make herself look good. I think that she is just so clearly a closeted lesbian who knows that if she was to come out of the closet, that she would be breaking down that idealized version of herself. Yeah, she's just basically the embodiment of compet. That's my thoughts. Okay, so my final kind of pieces of evidence about Glinda, I'm going to just pull from the book, because these are the quotes that kind of like most resonated for me in a queer reading. And so I think it's really interesting that Gregory Maguire didn't think that they were in love, because I feel like he's written them as if they are. So anyway, so this part of the book I think is like it would be after Popular, except of course the book is not a musical. And so I think it's just a nice like little indicator of how Glinda wants Elphaba's attention. When Glinda retired that evening, Elphaba was already in bed, blankets pulled up over her head, and a patently theatrical snore issuing forth. Glinda huffed herself into bed with a whump, annoyed that she could feel rejected by the green girl. And then when they both go to the Emerald City together, they take the train, but it takes like 3 days or something, and they have to stop at kind of inns and things over the journey, because there's not actually a bed in there. Wish that this had been involved, but basically they have like a full one bed trope situation, which is this. They rested like other third-class travellers in the back rooms above inn kitchens. In a single lumpy bed, they huddled together for warmth and encouragement, and Glinda told herself protection. Glinda would start as if from a frightful dream and nestle in nearer to Elphaba, who seemed at night never to sleep. Daytimes, the long hours spent in poorly sprung carriages, Elphaba would nod off against Glinda's shoulder. And then, just to indicate how important that moment was to Glinda, much later, so after Elphaba has been kind of, she's being perceived as this wicked witch now, we have this scene where Elphaba is actually trying to see if Glinda knows anything about her kind of affair that she's having with Fiyero, who in the books, Glinda and Fiyero have nothing to do with each other. They're not love interests with each other, but Fiyero marries this other woman. So Elphaba and him are having an actual affair. And Glinda has met Fiyero, I think, and basically Elphaba has seen her, is trying to figure out if she knows whether anything is happening, and she accuses Glinda of having an affair with Fiyero as a way to kind of figure that out. But for her part, Glinda had no real inkling that the witch was implicating herself as Fiyero's adulterous lover. Glinda was too fussed to listen that closely. The witch, in fact, alarmed her a little. It was not just the novelty of seeing her again, but the strange charisma Elphaba possessed, which had always put Glinda in the shade. Also, there was the thrill, basis interminable, which made Glinda shy and caused her to rush her words and to speak in a false high voice like an adolescent. How quickly you could be thrown back to the terrible uncertainty of your youth. So she's basically saying she's like giddy as a schoolgirl over the fact that she's talking to Elphaba. She doesn't even like know what she's talking about with Fiyero. She's just like, oh my god, my face is flushing, head is reeling, what is this feeling? For when she chose to remember her youth at all, she could scarcely dredge up an ounce of recollection about that daring meeting with the wizard. She could recall far more clearly how she and Elphie had shared a bed on the road to the Emerald City, how brave that had made her feel, and how vulnerable too. I mean, sorry, but like, why are you feeling brave and vulnerable about sharing a bed with a platonic friend? You don't. She's in love with her. So in the books, Elphaba does actually die when Dorothy throws the water on her. It's not a kind of fake death like it is in the musical. And so I think there's 4 books in the Wicked series. And throughout all of this, it's not from Glinda's point of view really much. It's mostly from the point of view of Elphaba's child. Um, but we get these moments where we come back to Glinda and either she is talking to somebody or we get kind of a moment in her head. And so it's years later, it's years after Elphaba has died, and Glinda still thinks about her. And she still thinks about her in a way which I think is just, it's not how you just think about an old friend. So here are some of those passages. She drifted to sleep at last as the summer dawn began. Birds insisted on their dim, pointless melodies. She didn't believe she dreamt of Elphaba. She didn't have the kind of aggravated imagination that loitered in dreams. Maybe she dreamt of a door opening and Elphaba coming back from the afterlife. To settle Glinda's consternation, to save her. Or maybe this wasn't a dream, just a foundational longing. Oh, I mean, sorry. She's like, there's nothing to say about that. What, like, foundational longing to just have her back? I mean, and then this at another point. For a moment or 10, she was back in Shiz, darting up some alley of flowering quinces, racing Elphaba to the fountain at the back of the quad. Elphaba was glowing with the effort, glowing emerald, and Glinda in her dream was almost absent to herself, caught up in admiring her friend. It happened so seldom, vacating the prison of one's limited apprehensions. Even dreams seemed ego-heavy, she thought, as she was waking. But oh, to see Elphaba, even in her dreams, is both reward and punishment, for it reminds me of my loss. Okay, I'm going to cry again. Jesus Christ. Now, in the final book, this is kind of my final point, and one that I feel like wraps everything up really nicely. So Glinda commits an act of treason and she's put in prison, which for all you Glinda haters, it maybe takes a while, but Glinda, she has her moments of anarchy, okay? She does the right thing when it comes down to it. Anyway, so she's been imprisoned, and there's kind of an implication that she will be let out by the citizens of Oz at some point, because she's still Glinda the Good. She's still kind of perceived as this thing. But she, whenever anybody asks her about it, doesn't really seem to care about the idea of being freed by the Ozians. She doesn't even seem to think about like that's an option. She continues to talk about someone else coming to free her, and it's implied very heavily that it's Elphaba, and that she thinks that Elphaba is the one who's going to come and save her. And so, like I said, in the books, at this point, Elphaba's dead. So everybody thinks that she's maybe going a little bit crazy because she's aged at this point, and that like maybe this is she's got dementia or something. And they're like, girl, Elphaba's been dead for like 40 years. She's not coming to save you from prison. Like, what's going on? But we also have been getting hints throughout the book that Elphaba is alive, or she's come back from the dead at some point. So it's never really said more than a kind of an implication. But basically what we know is that Glinda has spent her whole life after Elphaba has died longing for her, waiting for her, dreaming of her. And now in this moment where she is kind of at her lowest, she's still waiting for Elphaba to come back and to save her. And so this is Glinda's final scene in the book, in all of the books, and she's sitting in her cell in South Stairs prison, and then we get this. In her cell, Glinda woke up with a start. The lumbago was more punishing than the incarceration, but a sense of spring had filtered all the way down the open canyon roof of South Stairs, and she caught a whiff of freshness, of arrogant possibility. Her glasses had broken a year ago. She didn't need them anymore, not really. She knew who was turning the door handle of her cell. She called her name sleepily and added, "You wicked thing. You've taken your own sweet time, of course." And that's the end for Glinda. So Gregory Maguire leaves it ambiguous. She's clearly talking about Elphaba. He leaves it ambiguous as to whether maybe Glinda's dying in her cell, maybe she's hallucinating, and this is kind of a final hallucination that she hallucinates Elphaba, which, even if that is the case, I mean, personally, I read that as very romantic. Like, who's the last person that you dream of as you die? But given the fact that we have had throughout the series of books these more and more hints that Elphaba has returned from the dead, I think that that's unlikely. And so there's one theory that, just as Glinda was able to send Dorothy home from Oz, that maybe Elphaba might have the same powers, and so that she has maybe come to take Glinda out of Oz, as the name of the last book is called, Out of Oz, and that maybe she's going to take her off and that they'll live their life in some other world together. And that is how I like to imagine that it happens. I am really so excited to see part 2, the movie, and I'll be really interested to see if they do make any changes from Act 2 of the musical. I think it's like such a great opportunity to up the queerness. I mean, I just think that knowing that the musical is such a huge queer cultural phenomenon, you just have an opportunity to do something that I don't think was whether or not it was possible, but likely in 2003 when the musical first came out. Yeah, I just think there's an opportunity for something really cool and gay to happen in Act 2. And whether or not it does, I still think that the story itself is so queer coded to me. I think that they're so clearly in love, and maybe it's still a tragedy. Maybe the tragedy is that they don't end up together. But maybe there's an opportunity for something different. Maybe there's an opportunity for a different ending. And I think what's really fun about this story is that it's like we've had so many iterations of it. We're going from L. Frank Baum to Judy Garland to Gregory Maguire to the musical to the movie. And all of them have shifted and changed in their own ways. Even when it's been on Broadway, everyone, each cast does a different thing with the characters and with the choices that they make. And now we have this opportunity with something which can kind of stand on its own as well. So an opportunity for that to really like make a real difference and a change. I hope you've enjoyed this. I've had so much fun making it, and now that I have like vomited my thoughts out to you guys, maybe my poor friends can catch a break and I'll stop talking about this. But I'm realizing now that I'm saying this that I probably want to talk about it even more. So sorry. But if anybody has any thoughts, if you disagree with me, if you agree with me, let me know in the comments, and I would love to hear what you think. I think it's always just so fun to think about different readings and queer readings of stuff, and this has just been such a like fun example of something that I really enjoyed doing. So hopefully next week I will actually put out the video on Pride and Prejudice. I have the script ready. I just wanted to like get this one out because I just like I said, my brain was too full of it and I couldn't think of anything else. But yeah, thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.